Pick up your phone or your headphones or even a toy car lying in your home. Almost every label that you see says made in China. For most of our lives, that has been the default picture of global manufacturing, but here's the twist. While everyone has been talking about the big tech and AI, America has quietly started rebuilding its factories, and not in some tiny way. In the last few years, the US has been pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into new chip plants in the Arizona desert, EV battery factories across the Midwest, and massive clean energy and defense related manufacturing units. The really surprising part is that it's not being done out of nostalgia but as a strategy. Governments are changing laws, companies are rewriting supply chains, and new industrial map of the United States is taking its new shape. And whenever a country rewires its factories at the scale, something else starts moving in the background, which is the stock market. So in this video, we're going to decode the hidden boom in the American manufacturing and why it is happening now and how it is quietly reshaping the US market underneath the usual tech headlines. Section 1. From factory powerhouse to offshoring and back again. For most of the 20th century, Made in USA wasn't just a label. It was a brand of reliability. From cars in Detroit to steel in Pittsburgh and semiconductors in California, America built the backbone of the global economy. By the late 1970s, 1 in 5 American workers had a factory job. But in the next 3 decades, the world changed. Globalization became the new religion. Cheaper labor in Asia, container shipping, and trade deals like NAFTA and WTO memberships for China completely rewired the supply chains. Producing in China or Vietnam wasn't just cheaper, it was faster, scalable, and profitable, so the US quietly outsourced its muscle. By the 2000s, entire towns in the Midwest were left with empty warehouses. Made in China became the new global stamp, and America focused more on services and software. But history has a habit of circling back. Over the last 5 years, those same factories that shut down are slowly humming again. Not for textiles or toys this time, but for chips, batteries, and advanced machinery. The world's factory floor is shifting once more, and this time, United States wants the old seat back. Section 2. The triggers. COVID, China, and the return of the industrial strategy. Now, every major economic shift begins with a crisis. Now, for America's manufacturing revival, that moment came in 2020. When COVID locked down China, the world's supply chain snapped. Cars couldn't be built because the $10 chips were stuck in the ports. Pharmacies ran short of basic medicines. Even Apple struggled to ship iPhones. Suddenly, efficiency looked like a liability. The just-in-time global system that powered decades of cheap production now looked dangerously fragile. Then came geopolitics. The US and China entered a new phase of rivalry. Tariffs, technology bans, and sanctions began piling up. Washington realized that its most advanced industries, from semiconductors to EV batteries, depend heavily on a country it increasingly saw as a strategic rival. Now, that was a wake-up call. In response, US government flipped the script. Instead of leaving manufacturing to the market, it started writing checks. The CHIPS and Science Act pumped billions into new semiconductor plants. The Inflation Reduction Act offered massive tax breaks for clean energy production, but only if it happened on the US soil. States joined the race with their own incentive packages, competing to host the next mega factory. And for the first time in decades, the idea of industrial policy stopped sounding outdated. It became a national priority to build at home what once was imported, to protect the supply chains not just for profit but for security. Section 3. The new factory map of America. If you zoom out on a US map today, you'll see a new kind of industrial belt forming. It's not the old rust belt of the 1970s, it's the battery belt and the silicon heartland. In the deserts of Arizona, Taiwan's TSMC is building one of the world's most advanced chip plants. A $40 billion project designed to produce the same cutting-edge chips that once came only from Asia. 1,000 miles east, Intel is spending another $100 billion to create a semiconductor hub in Ohio. They call it the Silicon Heartland because for the first time, America's Midwest will manufacture chips instead of just cars. Then obviously there is the EV boom. In Tennessee's Kentucky, Georgia, and the Carolinas, global automakers are constructing battery gigafactories the size of entire towns. Ford, General Motors, Hyundai, Honda, and their Asian partners are pouring hundreds of billions into US soil, creating thousands of high-tech assembly and engineering jobs. Clean energy is joining the party too. Solar and wind equipment factories are opening across the South and Midwest, powered by incentives that reward made in America production. And the remarkable part is that this new industrial map isn't just coastal, it is spreading through America's heartland, reviving towns that once lost their factories. Brownfield sites that sat abandoned for decades are now being reborn as advanced manufacturing centers. After years of decline, cranes and construction crews are back. America is literally rebuilding itself from the ground up, one chip fab, one battery plant, and one solar factory at a time. Section 4: Jobs, Politics, and the New Industrial Playbook. Now, factories don't just make products, they also make politics. Every new plant breaking ground in America today is also a story about jobs, wages, and votes. For decades, manufacturing towns in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin were left behind. When the factories closed, middle class jobs disappeared with them. That economic pain reshaped US politics, fueling frustration, populism, and the rise of leaders promising to bring jobs back. Now, those promises are finally turning into physical reality. Both Democrats and Republicans have realized that building factories wins hearts. The Biden administration calls it Bidenomics, using government money to rebuild industrial strength. Republican governors call it smart business. Either way, no one wants to be seen as anti-manufacturing. That is why the new projects are strategically landing in the swing states. The chip plant in Arizona, the EV factories in Georgia and Michigan, the solar hubs in Ohio, all in places that will decide the next election. Each new facility means construction contracts, supplier networks, and thousands of jobs that local politicians can point to. And beyond politics, there is pride. For the first time in decades, American workers are seeing factories rise instead of fall. These aren't assembly lines of the old era, they are high-tech, automated, climate-controlled facilities, but they carry the same promise: stable jobs, better wages, and a sense that making things still matters. So while the headlines talk about policy, deep down, this is about people. The new industrial playbook is part economics, part strategy, and part emotion, a rebuilding of not just factories but national confidence in the US. Section 5: How the boom reflects in the US stock market. When factories rise, markets listen. Because every crane on the ground today is a signal of a future corporate earnings. The clearest evidence is in data. Manufacturing construction spending in the US just has hit high records, more than double the pre-pandemic level. Billions of dollars are flowing into new facilities, machinery, and logistics networks. And that money doesn't sit idle, it moves through listed companies, equipment makers, and automation firms. Companies that build factory robots, sensors, and control systems are reporting stronger order books than ever. Every new chip or battery plant needs precision machinery, electrical gear, and software to run efficiently. Then came the construction and engineering giants, along with logistics players that supply warehouses and distribution centers for these new facilities. Even materials and utilities firms are riding the wave as demand for steel, power, infrastructure climbs. It's not about the manufacturing themselves, it's the ecosystem that supports them. The US Industrial Index has quietly outperformed several traditional defensive sectors over the last 2 years, showing how investors are pricing in a long-term capex cycle rather than a short-term boom. So while the tech headlines dominate the news, the real structural story unfolding on Wall Street is this silent industrial rally and comeback driven by policy, capital, and the rebuilding of America's production engine. Section 6: The bigger picture, the new era of economic strategy. For decades, globalization meant chasing the cheapest supplier. The faster a company could move production to low-cost regions, the higher its margins looked. But that mindset is now fading. The new playbook is about resilience over efficiency. The US learned this the hard way, that saving a few cents per unit doesn't help if the entire supply chain collapses one day. That is why reshoring isn't just about economics, it's about control. Chips, clean energy, defense materials, and healthcare supplies are now considered national asset. That means governments will back them, companies will invest in them, and investors will track them as long-term strategic themes. At the same time, automation and AI have changed the math. Modern American factories don't compete with China's labor, they compete with China's machines. Robots, predictive maintenance, and precision manufacturing let US plants produce more with fewer people, narrowing the cost gap and boosting profitability. Globally, this shift is contagious. Europe is following a similar path with Made in Europe drives. Japan and South Korea are localizing critical components. The next decade might not be about globalization at all. It might be about regionalization, where countries build closer, more secure supply chains. So when the analysts call this as the new industrial revolution, they aren't exaggerating. It's a fundamental reset of how economies are wired, and the US just happens to be leading the charge. The story of Made in America is not about nostalgia, it's about survival. For decades, US optimized for efficiency, produced whatever it's cheapest, shipped wherever it is needed. That model delivered low prices and high profits until it cracked its own weight. But this comeback looks very different from the smokestack era of the past. It's cleaner, smarter, and far more capital intensive. These aren't factories filled with assembly line workers, they are data driven production ecosystems powered by robotics and software. And history shows that whenever America builds, it's the markets follow. The manufacturing boom is already shaping earnings, job numbers, and investment flows. It's also redefining what growth looks like, and less about apps and algorithms, more about energy, materials, and infrastructure. So the next time you see Made in USA printed on something, don't treat it as a vintage label. Treat it as a signal that the age of manufacturing is not over, it's evolving, and this time it might just redefine the next decade of the American economy. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like and share it with someone who still thinks that manufacturing in America is history. Subscribe to stay tuned for more deep dives into economic forces quietly reshaping the global markets, because the biggest shift never happens loudly, they happen in the background.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.